Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the worship service of the First Unitarian Church of Hobart. My name is Barb Langle, and I participate in the life of the church by being on the board of trustees, among other things. We are a religious community of people with diverse beliefs and shared values. Our diverse beliefs are expressed in our 6 sources, and our shared values are expressed in our 7 principles. Both can be found online at uua.org. Together, we strive to grow spiritually, build community, and live our values in the world. We have a couple announcements. I'm sure you all want to hear how we did at the rummage sale, so Roz will be, not right now, I'm going to make you wait. On behalf of the fundraising ministry, which is Carrie, Carla, Roz, and Sandy, and myself, I want to thank everybody so much. I have to say that I'm just so pleased. I've never, ever seen so much help. I mean, I'm just give you all of it. I mean, everybody was just wonderful. I want to thank everybody that donated, and it's almost everybody here. And for setup last Sunday, because everybody was so great, I have to acknowledge you and say your names.
Stand up when you hear your name.
No. For setup last Sunday was Jeff, Joe, Pete, Cindy, Oaks, Jerry, Don, Rachel, Dan, Marianne, Brad and Devin, Spencer and Dreams, James, Matt, and for... I said
Dan,
that.
you say Dan?
Yeah, I said Dan.
Wow.
Dan? Did I say Dan? Okay. Okay, and during the week, and a lot of these people actually were here all week along with us. I mean, I am just so happy. Everybody was. You don't know how great that makes me feel when you have, the more people you have, the more you get to know about people, and it's really fun because you learn about different people and you make friends with different people that you were kind of friendly with, but now you're great friends. You know, it's really great. So anyway, during the week, and there was a lot. We had Linda, Teresa, Marianne, Molly, Rachel, Jerry, Joe, Jeff, Pete, Michelle, and Oaks. And for cleanup yesterday, there was, actually we even had Carla's grandson, William, Jeff, Don, Tracy, Rachel, and Teresa. I hope I didn't miss anybody. The big contributors to the sale was Carol Kuchek, is I right? Carol Kuchek and Rebecca. Oh, that's her daughter. So I was thinking there was 2. See, learn something new every day. And a big thank you to Ruth, who actually introduced us to the card reader. And we will be using that and advertising it from now on. It really was a great help, and you know what? She taught me how to do it. So you can't say an old dog doesn't learn new tricks. Okay, now for the big grand total.
Hi. I can't add any more to what Barb said, other than I'm just flabbergasted. I've been here, this is going to be probably my 8th rummage sale since I started coming to church here, and every year it's more interesting. Every year it's a lot of work. Every year everybody gets older. This year we had some young bloods come and back us up, which made a big difference in getting that stuff from downstairs up. We made a grand total Which is approximately $1,000 more than we made at the last rummage sale. So it's moving forward. We're learning how to price better. We were told that we're going to get taken advantage of, so we're going to change that attitude real quick. So we learned something, the power of everyone getting together. And there was a time when people didn't want to do it because it's so much work. Bringing the stuff in, taking it downstairs, bringing it back up, throwing it out. But this is one of the reasons we do it. It's the camaraderie. It makes us stronger. It makes us better. And let me tell you something, all that stuff up there, it doesn't stop here with us getting a couple bucks. All the stuff that we have left over goes to charities. All that stuff packed over there, they come and get it on Tuesday, and it goes to Veterans Organization in Hammond that helps veterans reestablish into the communities. You know, so we keep giving and giving and giving through our rummage sales. And all the money we can get in is that much more money we can get in, period. So thank you all. And know that we're going to have a plant sale in May. Be more fun, because people will be happy. It's going to be spring by then, hopefully.
Right, and it isn't as much work.
And it's not as much work. It's little, tiny little things, but lots of them. So thank you all very, very much. Can't appreciate you anymore. Thank you.
I think Maggie has something to say, right?
We have so much to celebrate. When Barb said that that we had a card reader, I thought perhaps they were doing tarot card readings at the rummage sale. Most of you know that we have a new chalice that is in celebration of our 150th anniversary, which is coming up. And Jeff Stevens was the creator of that lovely chalice. And he insisted on not taking any payment. It is, in fact, a donation. And I have a thank you card I'd like to pass around if you would please sign from all of us. Thank you.
Okay. We are currently streaming our services online. The joys and sorrows portion of our service, however, is private, and we will take a break during that portion. Other than that, the service will be recorded and will be available for future viewing on Facebook, YouTube, and the church website. Wearing masks is optional right now, but if you are ill or think you have had contact with somebody who is ill with any kind of virus, please attend virtually. Now please let your Facebook and Twitter friends know that you're attending worship with hashtag First Unitarian Hobart. And silence your devices and take a deep breath and another, and join us in the spirit of reverence.
join me in lighting the chalice? We gather chalice now as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of a life we share together.
Our opening words this morning: come into the circle of love and justice. Come into the community of mercy, holiness, and health. Come, and you shall know peace and joy. I invite you to open your gray hymnals to hymn 131, Love Will Guide Us. Rise and body your spirit and join in song.
Please remain standing and join us in our affirmation of faith. The words are printed on the laminated handouts or order service on the screen. Love is the doctrine of this church. Quest for truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer. And this is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Everyone can be seated. Well, this is a very special Sunday. We have 3 new members. Yay! I would like them to come up. Rebecca, Cynthia, and Marianne.
So we have some words here, some questions. I'm going to ask for people's assent to some pieces. These are adapted from the words of Laura Randall. So today we welcome into our community some new members, and they have chosen to make a commitment to this congregation by signing our membership book. And
here with us and to have you chosen this community for fellow seekers to travel with you on your life journeys. Can everybody hear me? I forgot to put this up. Okay. Will you accept our gifts of fellowship, discovery, and service? Will you offer us your who spread hope with our living faith? will you engage with us as we seek to create a community and a world dedicated to love and justice?
And congregation, these ones are for you. Will you welcome these new members with the warmth and comfort of your fellowship? Will you seek to add your strengths and talents to the new gifts that they bring to us? And will you share our triumphs and our struggles as our community grows and changes?
We will.
Wonderful. So in that spirit, let us say together again this congregation's affirmation of faith that we just said a few moments ago. It's this promise that we make each week to ourselves and to each other, which holds our community together with common purpose and common love in the midst of our beautiful diversity of belief. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer. And this is our covenant: to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Beautiful. We welcome you as new members of this congregation.
Okay, now I'd like for you to come down here and sign the book. Cynthia's broke her wrist, so maybe her sister could sign for her and nobody will mind. Is that okay? And it's Marianne's birthday.
One last round of applause.
Now is the time for us to greet your neighbor. We are striving to create a worship space which is both spiritual and safe. However, we recognize that not everyone can attend in person. We extend a special welcome to everyone who is joining us virtually today. Thank you to our tech team for making the live streaming and recording possible. For those present in the sanctuary, please take a moment to greet your neighbor by waving your hands and letting the warmth of your smile fill the space between you.
Seated. So we invite folks in our worship services to share the joys and sorrows that they have on their hearts that they bring to these gatherings, to speak them aloud into this space. Anything that you have brought with you, and we've all brought something with us here that is maybe lifting us up, maybe weighing us down, but that it still stays within. And the invitation at this time is to bring that into voice, to share that with us so that we might all carry it together, be lifted up, or also carry the weight. So I'd invite you, when you share, just to share with us your name so that we know who you are, and I'll hold the mic up for you.
Hi everyone, I'm Becca.
story this morning is one that will probably be familiar to many of you who have seen or heard a Christian sermon at some point along the road. You might have encountered this, the parable of the talents. And it's a parable that's kind of embedded in between some other stuff. So in the actual story itself, it doesn't really get into the context of it, but I'll get into some of that in the sermon. It starts off with this quote: "For it is as if a man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property." Let me back up. This is Jesus speaking for this whole thing. "For it is as if a man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his ability. And then he went away. And at once the one who had received the 5 talents went off and traded with them and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. And after a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. And then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, 'Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more talents.' And his master said to him, 'Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master.' And the one with 2 talents also came forward, saying, 'Master, you handed over me to 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more talents.' And his master said to him, 'Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master.' And then the one who had received the 1 talent came forward, saying, 'Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you did not scatter. And so I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. And here, have what is yours.' But his master replied, 'You wicked and lazy slave. You knew, did you, that I reap where I did not sow and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him,' he says to one of the other slaves, 'and give it to the one with 10 talents. For to all those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. And as for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.'" So ends our story this morning. I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in singing "Call Down a Blessing." Please be seated. So we are in the midst of this series. We took a couple breaks for some other stuff that was scheduled. We are back into the series. And this whole series is about an economy of grace. For the first week, I talked about how the very first expectation placed on the Hebrews after they left Egypt was a prohibition on accumulation, a requirement that everybody gets enough. And that some of the oldest parts of the Bible are the prophetic writings of the 8th century BCE, which were written specifically to counter the injustice of the time, this overgathering of resources for some and the poverty of others. In the second week, I talked about not skipping past or excusing the systemic causes of the tragedies in our lives, which often come back to economics, about who has what and why and how. And the moral injury that all of us experience by virtue of just being a part of this society, of encountering inequality, homelessness, that results in a feeling of something being broken in us all. And the third week, we extended that into how society holds out the carrot of getting rich. But getting rich only seems so valuable and important when we're not totally free. When our desires for power grow beyond our relatedness to others. And so I invited folks to reclaim our humanity in everything that we do, including our handling of money. That can be another way of not addressing whatever the root desire is going on for us. And I specifically, the homework, the invitation that week was in every financial transaction that week to just notice in what ways were they feeding your own sense of your humanity or feeding your sense of your dehumanization. In the most recent week, talked a little bit about consumer church and participatory church. And there's a sort of hell that we can get into when we're trying to get something, which is different from the heaven of participating in something, and realizing our participation in the economy of grace. And this week we'll extend that into the role, the way of being that we are buying into in our society. So I had a couple of jobs when I was growing up. I was a paper boy for a while. I worked at Boston Market for a month. But my first extended job was working at a local record store. There was this place in Connecticut that had 15 locations around the state and a little bit up into Massachusetts. And I was 17, and before I got the job, I would just go over there and I would hang out. I lived in Meriden, Connecticut, and there's not a whole lot going on in Meriden, Connecticut other than a mall. But the next town over, Middletown, was where Wesleyan University was. And so there was actually cool college towny kind of stuff to go do. And there was this one record store. And I would drive over to Middletown. I would go to the record store, partly to get music, because I really love music, but also partly just to hang out and talk to the guys who worked there, because they were fun. And I filled out a job application at one point, just, hey, I wonder if you all are hiring. And he said, I don't think so, but feel free to fill this out anyway. And I brought it home. And I'd filled it out, and I hadn't gotten around to bringing it back to the record store. And I got a call on the phone. They'd found my number from a CD that I had ordered. And talked to me on the phone, and the manager said, so it turns out that a couple of us are leaving to go work somewhere else. And so we've got some openings. Are you still interested in the job here? And I said, yeah, that'd be great. That sounds good. And his response was, oh, you don't really sound that excited about this job opportunity. I was like, no, this sounds really good. I would love to work there. Yeah, I don't know if it feels right for you to work here. It doesn't feel like you have the right attitude. I was like, what kind of attitude do you want? He said, the response was, I want you to tell me how pumped you are. I said, I'm pumped. This sounds good. He's like, I want you to yell, I'm pumped, at the top of your lungs. And so I screamed it as loud as I could. He's like, okay, come in on Monday, I will give you the job. And so the benefit is I got to work, I got sort of the teenage experience of working at this record store, these, sort of cool guys who'd make fun of other people's music taste. And, but the two guys that I really loved hanging out with left. They're the ones who got the job somewhere else, and there were new folks who came in to work. But luckily, the new manager and I hit it off. And we became friends. We started spending time together outside of work. And I had this fun 17-year-old gig working at a record store. I went off to college. I would come back on breaks, and I would work there when I had free time. And then after a couple years of college, I decided to take a break from college for a little bit and figure out what I was doing. And so while I was on the break for college, I became the assistant manager at the record store. Now, one of the perks of being an assistant manager is you get more hours, and so my $4.27 an hour was going much further with working the 20 or 30 hours a week than it had been working just 5 or 10 hours a week. But there was a rule, and that was if you're a part-time staff person, you're not allowed to work 40 hours a week. We had one of those punch time clocks in the staff room in the back. And I would always ask to be scheduled at about 36, 37 hours a week or so. And I would wait until the end of the last shift of the week, and I would kind of be nudging it all throughout the week. So I'd be working a little bit more time. And then that very last shift, I would just punch a piece of paper a few times until I knew it was going to reach 39.99 hours for the week, and punch that on my time card. And so week after week after week, I would consistently get 39.99 hours. And at some point, the word from the home office came saying, no more of that. No more of that at all. That's close enough to being full-time. We don't want you to do that anymore. And so I stopped. Begrudgingly, I stopped doing that and kept it to maybe 35, 33 hours a week. So I'd had this beautiful relationship with my coworkers, and they became friends, and it was a fun place to work. But when you peel back the layers of that, there's, what are the numbers? What are the expectations? Are you staying within the lines? What are the rules here? And found that there's this fundamental push-pull, zero-sum game underneath that I was faced with, partly because of how labor law is structured, and partly through the owners of the company wanting to make more money and not give benefits. There are a bunch of different reasons. And this push-pull, zero-sum game engagement where the other person is trying to get the most that they can. I was trying to get the most that I could with the 39.99 hours a week. My boss was trying to get the most that they could through having me work a little bit less and not get benefits. And maybe in any of those instances, I'm the one who starts it or the other one who starts it. But there is this tendency in our society towards that push-pull. How can I get the most? How can I squeeze something out of this? I want to be clear here, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with boundaries or accountability or clarity, but I am saying that there are fundamental inequalities that are baked into so much of what we're faced with on a day-to-day basis that there is a norm of struggle that is often hidden from our conscious awareness, to the point that even when that struggle is not there, it can seem like it is, because that's so often how everything else works. What I wouldn't have known at the time how to put into words was that by the time I got the timesheets, it was already locked in. There was already this push-pull over resources. And that being baked into our economy makes it so hard to not get sucked into it. And that's one of the key benefits of being part of a faith community. These are often the primary places in society in which we get support in formulating and realizing alternatives to that push-pull. But all too often, faith communities also just go along with convention. There's all these stories in the Christian Gospels that often get stripped of their clear political meanings. In the previous week of this series, we went through the story in which the rich man comes to Jesus. He's concerned about his salvation, and Jesus tells him that the rich man would have an easier time passing through the eye of a needle than getting into heaven. And although that's a pretty clear statement, interpreters over the past 2,000 years have come up with all sorts of ways of interpreting it so that the statement that seems like it's saying that is actually saying something else, and one of them being being that, well, the eye of the needle was actually this gate in Jerusalem, and so it's more of like a metaphorical passing through, and it's trickier for the rich, but actually, and so all these stories about peasants and rich landowners, or lords and slaves, or lepers and lawyers, somehow they often become stories about abstract theology or morality, and the political or economic edge gets lost. In the words of biblical scholar Ched Myers, when the sociocultural context of a parable is ignored or suppressed, we inevitably recontextualize the story in terms of our own unconscious political assumptions. While our imposed schemas often defy the coherence of the text itself, this interpretive strategy functions to thoroughly domesticate the parable under our status quo. And stories meant to challenge our preconceptions are thus used to legitimate them. And so do we disarm the gospel's most powerful rhetorical weapons, whose purpose is to rescue believers from our domestication by that same status quo. And that's one of the key values of any sacred text, to undomesticate us from our assumptions, from our patterns, from our habits, to show us something that we wouldn't have come up with otherwise, that flies in the face of everything that we know or believe to be true. And so when Jesus Christ or Gautama Buddha or any spiritual teacher seems to be saying what we already believe, we can be pretty sure that something is missing from the equation. And Jesus' teachings in particular generally tried to, in Myers' words, unmask the illusions his audience had about the status quo in order to open their hearts and minds to what he proposed as an alternative, what he called the kingdom of God. And he had two basic kinds of parables, one of them to do the unmasking and one of them to offer that alternative. So this morning's story, the parable of the talents, the conventional reading of the story assumes that the master in the story is supposed to represent God. And a lot of churches use the story to encourage Christians to use their individual resources and abilities for the benefit of the master God. When we talk about talents, as in your gifts and talents, the word talent in that context comes from this story. It was originally a unit of measurement. But because it's been talked about so much as this thing that you do, that you bring into the world, we got a new word. But also, if the master in the story is supposed to represent God, that's kind of a messed up God. It's this neglectful Lord who's just all about making more money and is otherwise pretty ruthless and uncaring. It seems like kind of a weird angle for Jesus to take in his ministry. The parable talks about this great household, which would be pretty recognizable to Jesus' audience at the time. The landlord was often away on business and would have his slaves handle his affairs. But the amounts of money in the parable are pretty high. A talent is a little over 60 pounds. In this case, 60 pounds of silver. So converted into our current economy, that's about 4.5 million. And so the Lord and his household, this parable that describes it, is not some small fry, mom and pop situation. It's a considerable household. This was just the one talent for the least able slave. There's the other slaves who got the 5 and 10 talents. And so when people tell this story as if the landlord is supposed to be God, it misses this key factor that the landlord is happy with the 2 slaves who earn him so much money by doubling his investment. But in first century Palestine, the highest legal interest rate was 12%. There were clear teachings and moral judgments against charging any more than that. And so the audience that listened to the story would have heard it and been disgusted at the landlord. So clearly the landlord is not supposed to represent God in the story. The picture painted in the parable, as Myers writes, is one in which large landowners made loans to peasant smallholders based on speculation about future crop production. And with high interest rates and vulnerability to lean years and famine, farmers were often unable to make their payments, which meant they faced foreclosure. And once in control of the land, the new owner could continue making a killing by hiring laborers to farm cash crops. And in the parable, the master's slaves do this highly profitable work very well. In the first century, this audience that heard the story would have been disgusted by the high interest rate and been familiar with the business practices of the landowners who preyed on the vulnerabilities of the farmers. And so why would we read the story as if the landlord is supposed to be a stand-in for God? As if the actions of the first two slaves are supposed to represent the good and right thing to do? Wouldn't it make sense for the third slave who doesn't play along to be the hero of the story? When the landlord follows up with the third slave tells him that he buried the money in the ground. Now, it can be hard to tell in a story from 2,000 years ago, many thousands of miles away, exactly how the humor might be in the story. But in a society filled with people who work the land, the idea of burying money in the ground does seem to have a joke in there somewhere. Here's a crop that, when it was planted, did not produce any fruit. And so the parable seems to be demonstrating a point that there's a difference between the economic worldview that considers value in terms of how we can use things productively, and an economic worldview that considers primarily the value in exchanging things between one another. It doesn't seem like the slave is actually trying to argue his case. As it's recorded in the book of Matthew, the slave's explanation, he's not trying to be nice. He's not trying to be kind or try to say, oh, this is why you should treat me well. He gets really accusatory. He says, I knew you were a harsh man. And the Greek word that's used here is associated with the Egyptian pharaoh's hard-heartedness. And he continues on, you reap where you did not sow and gather where you did not scatter seed. If the slave was trying to argue his case or placate the landlord, he probably would have said it a little differently. But rather than trying to get his landlord on its side or to go easy on him, he seems to be saying, look, you're not a good person. And in good conscience, I couldn't try to play along with you and help make you even more money. And so the landlord tries to make an example of him. He takes back the money and gives it to another slave, and he offers the landlord's philosophy of the world. For those who have, more will be given, but for those who have not, even what they have will be taken away. It doesn't seem like the parable is agreeing with the landlord's philosophy. It seems like it's a cautionary tale about the landlord's philosophy. After all, soon after that, right after this story happens, Jesus himself plays a similar role of standing before the powerful and speaking against them and taking the consequences. So it would seem kind of weird for the parable to not be taking the side of this third slave. And at the end of the parable, the slave is banished to the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. When the story is read as being from God, as if God is the landlord, it's easy to think of the outer darkness as the hell that one is exiled to when you're not on God's side. But as universalists, it's probably not how we would read it. When the landlord tells the slave about the outer darkness and weeping and gnashing of teeth, he's talking about his own perspective. That for the landlord, outside of what is thought to be good and beautiful by the powerful, there is only hell to be found. But the story that immediately comes after this one, right after the parable of talents ends, Jesus keeps talking, and he tells another story. We don't have time for the whole story here, but the high point might sound familiar to you. Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. In other words, by not playing along with the landlord, the third slave was exiled to being on the margins. But precisely because he gets further from the center of power, he also gets closer to the mark in how he lives his life. His world might be turned upside down, and it makes sense that turning worlds upside down might make people uneasy. It makes sense that there would be centuries of folks trying to find some other way of interpreting it. A word about this upside downness, quickly, an aside. I was before I did my first full-time minister gig, I went to an interim minister training. It's a week-long training that we go to. And there's a lot of sitting down and talking and exchanging of ideas, discussion. And in between all that talking, when we start up a break, when we come back from a break, we sing some songs to get our body moving, to get some air flowing. And after one of the breaks, we sang, "We're going to sit at the welcome table." And at the end of singing, we're sit at the welcome table, one of the ministers in the room looked at everybody aghast, saying, "You all are a bunch of white people singing a slave song about how you want to sit at the welcome table." That's one way of thinking about the welcome table. That it's the place that the powerful get to sit and invite other folks to it. But the welcome table could never be the one that the slave owner is already sitting at, the one that the powerful set out. The true welcome table is precisely the one that the powerful don't yet have access to. For them, or to be more precise, for many of us, it is harder to get to the welcome table than it is for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. There's no fancy style around that welcome table. I remember when I was growing up and Amazon wasn't yet a thing, but Walmart was. And there's a temptation to go to Walmart because you can save 50 cents on this thing, and you can save 75 cents on this thing, and you can save $4 on this thing. But when we peel back the layers of the saving a little bit here and the saving a little bit there, when we peel back the marketing and the lower prices, what bones of the zero-sum game do we find in there? The everybody's out for themselves mentality. What do we find in that? How caught up and tied into it are we? The spiritual journey, when we engage in it with dedication, has a way of turning things upside down in favor of a more radical hope, that of the circle of love and justice, the community of mercy, holiness, and health that fosters peace and joy. Now, we're caught up in a larger system. It's not bad to ask for more money. I congratulate folks for being able to do that. That's a beautiful thing. Our individual actions don't suddenly change everything around on a dime. But we can still, with every financial interaction that we engage in, ask ourselves, where is the circle of love and justice in this? Where in this is the community of mercy, holiness, and health? And so that's my invitation to you, my suggestion, my homework over this coming week. Each time that you either engage in some financial transaction yourself or hear about one on the news, asking yourself, where is the circle of love and justice in this? And where in this is the community of mercy, holiness, and health? Because the squeaking the most out of things, the what's the highest return focus, the zero-sum game that sees the only help as coming from our own individual actions, from our own striving for our individual selves, and maybe our families and our friends, it doesn't trust in a larger hope or promise. It doesn't trust in the possibilities of a table that might truly welcome us all, in which we don't have to fight over the last slice of pizza, but could trust that there is enough to go around for all, that all will be sheltered, that all will be protected, and may it ever be so as long as time exists.
Thank you, Pastor. Now is a time in our service for our offering. We give to remind ourselves of how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and friendship. We give with the faith that together we have enough. The money in the baskets goes to sustaining the mission of our community. The money in the cups goes to our Faith in Action ministry and a different charity chosen by the ministry every month. This month, the money from the cups goes to the self-injury support group of Northwest Indiana that people spoke about last week that Ruth helps with. For those not here with us today, there is an online link on the screen for both one-time and regular donations. And we have maybe one more. We have 4 volunteers. For your prayers, your presence, your service, and your gifts, we are truly grateful. And now please rise as you're willing and able and join in singing the closing hymn, number 407 in the gray hymnal. We're going to sit at the welcome table. This morning from Psalm 121, I lift my eyes to the mountains. Where is help to come from? Help comes from the Eternal, who made heaven and earth, and the Eternal guards you, sheltering you. The Eternal will protect you as you come and go, now and forever.
Sorry, I have strict instructions from the tech team. My accompanist is Greg Colton. If you notice, Jeremy's not sitting here right now. Yes, thank you.
Please join me in extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you. Join us in the parish hall for coffee and conversation.